All right, well, welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, November the 5th. It's now 7 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. We have 4 items on our agenda tonight to discuss. The first item, of course, is our annual joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Mr. Fearborn, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carteret and Mr. Gruss actually have a formal presentation for this particular joint meeting that they would like to make to the council and to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Would you want everybody to introduce themselves around the table, sir?
I think that'd be great. Yeah, so we'll start with the commission. Sir, go ahead.
Commissioner Mario Urquilla, Ward 2.
Jay Holman, City Council, Ward 3.
Reginald Townsend, City Council, Ward 1.
Kevin Kellogg, City Council, Ward 1.
Tom Circle, City Council, Ward 2.
John Berenson, City Council, Ward 4.
Joe Burke, Ward 2, City Council.
Jim Peterman, where am I?
Ward 2.
New guy. Ward 2, Planning and Zoning.
Melody Armstrong, Planning and Zoning, Ward 4.
Kelly Fizer, Planning and Zoning, Ward 1.
Jerry Faulkner, Planning and Zoning, Ward 3, and it's good to see all the former P&Z members here as well.
Matt Wiggins, Planning and Zoning, Ward 3.
I'm Sonia Abdelgawad, and I'm City Council member for Ward 4.
Kevin Barber, City Councilman, Ward 3.
Chris Turnbow, Mayor.
Jim Fearborn, City Manager.
David Gress, Associate Planner.
Jim Carteret, Director of Development Services.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Mr. Zur?
Jonathan Zur, City Attorney.
All right, thank you, sir. We have some audience members tonight. Oh, welcome.
Thank you, sir. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Carteret, who will probably immediately turn it over to Mr. Gruss.
Yes, I will. Thank you, sir. Tonight, Mr. Gress and I, we wanted to talk about an initiative that was initially proposed, discussed as part of our Community for All Ages Master Plan that we approved a couple of years ago. And as most of you have seen the document and recall, the plan included 13 goals, many of which we've already either completed or are currently underway. Items such as our all-inclusive playground, accessory dwelling units on residential lots, the enhanced mobility of our residents, the OATS bus service, which is next on your agenda, and even improving crosswalks along 58 Highway, all identified as part of the Community for All Ages Master Plan. One of the goals that we would like to start working on is to encourage our builders and developers in our community to utilize what's known as universal design solutions in new home construction. You know, over the last 15 years, we've constructed almost 2,700 new homes. And in a community of our size, that's an astounding number. What we would like to do as we continue to progress, as you know, with residential construction is start to see if we can get builders interested in making these homes more compatible for people to age in place. Because residents, you know, when you move into a home, a lot of people talk about it being their lifetime home. They want to stay there for their entire life. But things change in their living abilities, and sometimes they're forced out of the home because the home's no longer compatible for them. They can no longer stay within the home. What we'd like to do is talk about a program which makes that home universally designed, which allows individuals to age in place. Simple things that can be done when the home is first constructed that helps it become adaptable as individuals' physical abilities may change in their lifetime. And that's what the Universal Design Program is about. We'd like to offer a request to do a pilot project under this guideline, and Mr. Gress will do a brief PowerPoint presentation about what is universal design, what does it really mean as far as components of new home construction, then talk briefly about our pilot project that we'd like to propose this evening.
Thank you, sir. So as Mr. Carteret kind of gave a very nice overview of what we're here to talk about tonight and what universal design is, but before we get too far into that, I kind of want to take a step back and talk about, kind of reiterate why it is we think this might be a good idea and a good project to pursue specifically here in Raymore. So he mentioned greatly the Building a Community for All Ages Master Plan, which you all more than likely saw at one point in its process. either the early stages in 2016 or when we finally adopted the plan in early 2017. But overall, that plan, the major goal behind that is to recognize the high concentration and the growing number of older adults that we have in our community, and in turn, that plan recommends a number of strategies to address those needs and accommodate those changes of an aging population. And one of those specifically that you all saw previously was the accessory dwelling units and expanding those to be allowed on all of our single-family residential lots, and hopefully increase the prevalence of those throughout our community. Another one of those specifically related to housing was exploring the potential for incorporating universal design solutions in our residential construction that we see here in our community, which leads me into our next point. As a rapidly growing community, Raymore is consistently ranked within the top 10 for building permit and home construction activity in the Kansas City area. So with the top players like Kansas City and Lee Summit, Blue Springs, we're not far behind from those large cities in our metro area. As you're all aware, we're building a lot of houses here in the city. Which is why we think it's a good idea to capitalize on that and address some of these issues on the front end, where studies consistently show that's exponentially cheaper versus 20 years down the road when you reach that age where you're no longer to live in your house. As you get older and your house gets older, it becomes increasingly more expensive to retrofit your house to accommodate those exact same features. So again, just kind of reiterating the number of the population that we have here in the city of Raymore, and the share of that population that does fall into that category of older adults or those that are aged 65 or above. When you look at our standard list that we use to kind of compare ourselves with cities around the region, at least on the Missouri side, we rank at number 2 just behind Gladstone, as far as the percentage of our population that is 65 and above. When you take into account cities on the Kansas side, we only fall just one more down the list at number 3 in the region, which is shocking when you look at cities like Lee Summit, who have facilities like John Knox Village. We're not that far behind communities of that size in terms of the older adult population in general, and that number is consistently growing. In addition, just based on the most recent data available, Raymore actually has the highest number of occupied housing units in the city, where the householder, or the head of household, if you will, is 65 years and above. And that can mean one of two things: either residents that currently live in the community are wanting to stay in the community and remain in their house, or at least within their neighborhood or community as they age, or residents from other communities around the area are wanting to move to Raymore for any multitude of reasons to age in this community and call this area home. And then last but not least, as I kind of mentioned, the potential cost savings. Staff looked at a number of different studies that indicate, again, that it's exponentially cheaper to incorporate these types of facilities and features on the front end of the home construction versus 20 years down the road, 15 years down the road, trying to retrofit a home, which can run up, more than $15,000 when you start looking at relocating doorways, widening hallways. Becomes exponentially more expensive when the home as it's currently built. The study showed that incorporating these features on the front end could range anywhere from $500 to $8,000, depending on the combination of the different types of features that you might want to include, versus $15,000, like I said, on the back end, when you're suddenly realizing that it's becoming increasingly harder to remain in your house. Those renovations can become increasingly expensive. And one of the common myths that we hear when you start thinking about the building community and the types of houses that are built is that it's rather difficult to accommodate these types of features in homes, because, as you all know, many builders have their 15 or 20 different floor plans that they're not all the same, but for generally they have their like I said, 15 or 20 generic home plans that they're able to build fairly quickly. The study actually showed that upwards of 80% of those homes can easily accommodate the small changes that can make your house exponentially easier to remain in your house for a number of years. It was only that 20% of those truly custom-built houses, or just those truly unique floor plans, that become increasingly harder to adjust as you start looking at these design features. And then the next question is what is universal design? And the definition, by nature, is an approach to design that incorporates products, building features, or elements which, to the greatest extent possible, can be used by anyone, regardless of their age, ability, or disability. And one of the neat things that I always like to stress is that a lot of these things that we talk about are things that are going to be incorporated into the house no matter what. Things like light switches or electrical sockets, or hallways or doorways. It's just strategically placing those throughout the house that's going to make them easier to use throughout your lifetime. It's not, you know, the height of your light socket or your light switch isn't something that's only going to be only beneficial when you're, you know, 50 or 60. It's still going to benefit you when you're, you know, 25 years old and moving into that house. So it's important to know that these changes can have effects on your life throughout the entirety spectrum of your lifetime. And I've listed, I won't go into too great a detail of the 7 principles, but these are the 7 principles that really define what universal design is and how those features and products are used, the information that they can communicate on how they're supposed to be used, the tolerance for error, the ability for individuals to understand how to use them. Lots of great information on what these principles are and how they're applied to not just housing in general. That's just the topic we're here to talk about this evening, but these principles span the spectrum of commercial development, public and open spaces, parks and recreation facilities. They can apply generally to any sort of facility, public or private, and how that space is designed, which is really great. So just some of the features that I talked about, I'll talk about a few here, but there's an entire spectrum of where these different features can fall in the category of universal design. So the most simple, of course, would be the placement of light switches and electrical sockets, making it easier so you don't have to bend down to the floor to plug something in. You can, it might be able to be plugged in at waist height, or the light switch being placed 5 or 6 inches a little bit lower, so you're not having to reach up as you age. You know, eliminating the step to get into your front house, so if you happen to be wheelchair bound at some point in your life, you're not having to make the expense of constructing a ramp to get in and out of your house, or just making it easier in general to get, you know, from the outside of your house to the inside. One interesting thing is the effect that lighting can have on the perception of a house, the contrast between different surfaces, the floor, the countertops, the walls, and how, you know, your eyes perceive those as you age. Is a very interesting thing, and the effect that that can have on how individuals move about their house. You know, simple things like the door handles and the door fixtures on your cabinets. You know, it's a lot easier to operate a lever action door handle versus having to physically grab a handle and twist it. That action becomes significantly harder as you age and as your muscles start to degrade, and things along those lines. Designing things like bathrooms and kitchens to maximize that space and make it easier to get around as you age. And you know, one day you might need a wheelchair to get around your kitchen. So designing those facilities to make it easier to get to your kitchen sink or your dishwasher in a wheelchair or with a walker is really something that we should be educating our residents to think about, at least as they're moving to the city and constructing all these new homes. And in addition, wider doorways, wider hallways to accommodate a wheelchair or a walker as you might age and might need those types of features to get around your home. So what might this look like in Raymore, and why would this be, you know, a benefit to the city? One of the things that we'd be able to do is, you know, not everybody's going to want to incorporate these features into their home. Not everybody moves into their house for it to be their forever home, if you will. But it's the notion of putting that information out there for them if they're interested. One of the things that we found is that a lot of people don't incorporate this into their house just because they're simply not aware of what universal design is or how it can help them. So putting this information out there and just getting the word out about what it is, we think would have a huge impact on the individuals that are moving to our community. It also offers the ability to capture and retain an older population, which is continuously growing. So marketing Raymore as truly a community for all ages where people can move and, you know, call this their forever home, if you will, and choose to remain in this community throughout the duration of their lifetime. And last but not least, it gives an opportunity to build quality housing that lasts throughout the entire community and throughout the lifetime of our residents. Again, to keep those individuals here as long as they can. So as Mr. Carteret mentioned, we've kind of been talking here over the last several months about a potential pilot project that would showcase what these different features are and get the word out about what universal design is and how it could benefit our residents. So one thing that we've kind of come up with, and we would, you know, certainly entertain any suggestions and questions that you all might have. Ultimately, however, we would like to select and work with a local home builder that's working here in our community to design and construct a model home that would incorporate any number of universal design features. It could be, like I said, simple things as simple as a light switch and electrical socket. It could be redesigning the way their model homes currently are now and construct totally something new and something we haven't seen before. Just something that's a little bit different and gets the idea out there that these changes aren't, you know, so significant to where it's not impossible to incorporate these things in your house. But of course, that comes at a cost sometimes to incorporate those. So we are, proposing that in exchange for the access for the city and for residents to take tours of those homes, as well as maybe to run a potential education campaign through social media, through our website on what those little features are and what impacts they might have on your life, we would in exchange potentially waive all the permitting fees that would be associated with that, which on average is about $7,500 depending on the size of the home and its location in the community. But in exchange for that, it would give not only the builder some, really great publicity and what they're doing, but it would also show, not only our community, but residents outside the community that we're welcome to inviting residents of all ages and abilities to our community to live here, and that we are, we're on board with the Communities for All Ages initiative, and we recognize the needs of a growing older adult population in the city, and we're willing to do what it takes to address those needs and accommodate those individuals. That would conclude my presentation, and Mr. Carter can certainly chime in, but if there's any questions specifically on what universal design is or what it could potentially look like in the community, we would be more than happy to answer those.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, David. Very good presentation. A couple of questions. You mentioned this, people, when this would be new construction, so people build a home, a lot of times they build it to stay or they build it to sell. Is there any statistics on if you build one that would incorporate some of this stuff, what happens to the resale value of it? How does it affect that? And then one thing you didn't mention, Mr. Holman had gotten some information on some of these homes, and a lot of these homes are what they call smart homes, where a lot of it's computer controlled. So, one of the issues you have, say people younger than me, but if you built a home, how is technology going to change in the future? How do you, 20 years ago we wired a home, Cat 5 lines, and now you don't even use those anymore. So, how do you crystal ball that, or is there a way to do that? So it's just a couple of questions and comments, I guess, but thank you.
Great question, and to speak specifically to the kind of the resale value, if you will, of homes. One of the things that we constantly talk about here at Raymore is that, we want to always have that pool of buyers that's looking to essentially, move up to the next level of housing, from your apartment to your, single-family home to your family home where you eventually raise your family. And one thing that this does is that, incorporating these features, it opens up that pool of buyers that you could potentially have. If I were to move here to the community and incorporate some of these features that might make it easier for an older adult that, they might be looking to downsize at the exact same time I'm looking to upsize and get a larger home, and incorporating those features that would be marketable to older adults, given that they know what those features are, it just opens up that pool of buyers to, be interested in your home, which I can only imagine, positively affects the resale value and the market value of your home.
Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good presentation also. While topic is on universal design and the aging, potential residents aging in the home, looking at the design in the presentation, this is also for all abilities, for those who may have kids with handicap or disabilities. This would service them as well for those families that have those needs?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not related specifically to older adults. The really interesting thing about universal design is that it can benefit anyone, no matter their age, ability, or disability.
I think Mr. Berenson was next. Did you have something, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gress. Great job tonight, by the way. I just happened to talk to two different people in the last 6 months that one person bought a home, one person built a home, both here in Raymore, and they were both specifically looking for zero-entry type homes, one for a special needs child and one for a mother that was going to move in. And they both said that they had a lot of difficulty finding anything in the area to accommodate them. So I have to think that certainly there is demand for it, and I would certainly hope too that would increase the value of the homes. So two quick questions. Do we have any research? I think you already kind of addressed it. Do we have any research that tells us, or can we find what the impact is for resale value? And secondly, are there any other local communities that are doing this right now?
Two very good questions. Thank you, sir. There is a lot of research and literature out there that talks about the value that this, or the impact that this has on the value of your home in general, is you know, specifically the resale value. I didn't bring any of that specifically with me this evening, but certainly if you're interested, I can throw some of that together and share it with you all. With, you know, if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to do that. And then I'm sorry, what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Are there any other local communities here or the Kansas side that are doing this at any extent?
I don't know of any local communities that are, and certainly Mr. Carteret can chime in if he knows of any. But a lot of this literature is really focused on, you know, the coastal communities, areas of a lot higher density where housing might be, you know, I don't want to say a little bit more higher demand, but there might be a little bit more shortage of housing, where people are having troubles locating housing that might accommodate their needs. Like I said, I don't know of any local communities in our area that offer either incentives or have any requirements in general for universal design. I know there's a couple communities that have recognition programs that, you know, you can get recognized as a bronze level, you know, universal design house, or silver or gold. There's really no, you know, monetary benefits, or really it's more of just the recognition of being that way. But locally, I'm not aware of any programs related to that.
Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation of a developer that came in that wants to, and is talking about building the townhome apartments there just north of Eagle Glen. And I'm hearing this tonight, and I'm remembering what was said 2 weeks ago, and the question that I come up with is, could we approach the, like that builder or a future builder of those multifamily homes to help to see if they could incorporate some of these universal designs? That way, because what I remember so well about them talking about is that they're talking about having units that if I was to live in one of the apartments of 1 or 2 bedroom and I had guests over, that they could have, that they were talking about having guest units there. Now, I would see that being a, you know, just on my own opinion, my own mind going by itself here, that would be a perfect opportunity or an example to have these elements in that so a multitude of people could see it. You know, I like the idea of approaching a developer or a builder to build a house with that, but once that house is sold, you know, if I was to buy the house, I certainly wouldn't want 17,000 people coming into my house a year to see what that is, you know, but I would love to have an example around, you know, kind of like an open house. But, you know, I just don't see how we could do that. But I do see maybe an opportunity with a future developer that we could encourage somehow or another, approach them to incorporate these so people can get exposed to it.
Thank you. Mr. Urquilla.
Yeah, you mentioned resale value, and it came up a few times, but we also talked about the initial cost. Has there been any research or evidence around the initial cost of a home when you incorporate these things versus a home where you don't incorporate those things? And is there, while it may cost $500 to $8,000 more, does it increase the value or the initial cost of the home more than that, less than that? And then on the question of builders or developers, are we aware of anyone that does development here locally that is interested in doing something like this, and is an incentive necessary to get them to do it?
Very good question. I will mention that there are a few houses within our community. You wouldn't certainly know from looking at it from the street, but there are several houses throughout our community that have incorporated, to some extent, several universal design features within them. And actually, one of them sits on our task force for our Community for Villages master plan, which is kind of where we started with all this. So it's very interesting to see that people in our community actually are utilizing this. The builder, we're kind of doing some research to figure out, you know, what the builder that did that initially, if they're still around, if they have an interest in, you know, working with the city. To date, though, I don't know of any builders that specifically incorporate these design aspects into their building plans, unless it's specifically requested by their client, which leads us to believe that some sort of incentive would be required to sort of spur the interest in the developed community to start seeing these types of things in our community.
And I think most of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I know the council know, former council member Stevens spent years trying to find a contractor who would be willing in this particular market to actually address, because he is very big on universal design. And I suspect from his experience and sharing that with staff that we would probably have to incent a builder at that level. Probably, Mr. Carteret and I were talking about it today, what we would be looking for is putting the word out, letting them know that for a particular period of time, we would like for them not to resale that home during an educational period where we could get people in there. Then obviously it would be up for resale. But by then we would have completed an educational campaign on this type of housing. And when we were out looking for the builders, informing them of the incentive, we would give everyone the opportunity to put their name in the hat. If there was more than one, we would probably pick one through a lottery system, drawing the name out of a hat, and use that particular builder in their lot.
Mr. Holman, go ahead. Oide, okay, yes.
So one thing that comes to my mind, roughly 40 years ago, Foxwood Springs was being built. And I don't know, I can't imagine that the technology incorporated in Foxwood would necessarily meet all of the current guidelines or recommendations, but I've been in homes in Foxwood. I don't know that we have any members of City Council currently that live in Foxwood. We certainly have over the years, but the homes at Foxwood certainly are designed, as far as I know, basically zero entry, one level, wider doorways. And so I'm not advocating that we try to build another Foxwood, but I think it would be smart to check out Foxwood today with 40 years of experience there and learn from it.
Anyone else? You know, Kevin, I like your idea about the complex. My sister has a condo down on the plaza, and at that facility, they have one, I think it's a one-bedroom apartment that they keep for visitors of residents there, and they actually rent that out. If we could talk to our builder and see if they would be willing to do something like that and include these universal designs in that particular project, it might be helpful for later on down the line, at least people being able to see those items incorporated in a construct rather than just, you know, looking at it pictures in a book or something. Mr. Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing that I'm going to bring up is experience many years back, and I guess I'm getting old, I'm 51, but when I started out my career, I started out as an apprentice carpenter. And I remember working on many different buildings, residential and commercial, you know, and part of the features that we put in that I learned as an apprentice was putting in extra studs. So and I know that this is what Jim and the others is talking about, is that you may not see the feature in a house, but to change a door from a 32 to the 36 inch, if that stud is already in the wall, all you have to do, and the header going across it, if it's built in there in a universal design and a systemic way of building, it's real easy to take that stud out, cut the drywall out, and put a new door in, you know, and that's where a project could cost, you know, if you had to restructure a wall, that could cost you in the thousands of dollars. But if that stud is already in that wall at construction time, it's still the same philosophy as what we did, the council did with the radon. We made sure that that infrastructure is in there in the case that it does come, that it is needed. That extra cost about $500 to the homeowner. But to retrofit a house, the studies that we got, and when I remember those talks taking place, that cost was going to cost the average $7,500. So, you know, I'm kind of going all over here, but I'm trying to bring it into that universal design doesn't have to be seen. It doesn't necessarily have to be seen, but it's inside of the building so that in the future a change can be made with minimal cost.
Jim or David, do either one of you know, you haven't really talked to a developer yet, have you, about this particular thing? Or?
We have not yet, no.
Okay. What would be interesting to see if they could take one of their existing plans that they universally use at either one of our projects, Creekmore, Eagle Glen, or whatever, and make those modifications at least on maybe a computer simulation like I know you're capable of doing, that you'd be able to see some of those designs incorporated in present-day plans that they have out there. It'd be kind of interesting to see that. Mr. Wiggins.
Yes, thank you. You're referring to the studs, but obviously something that can't be seen. That's a great thing to incorporate. One of the things, though, that Mr. Gress mentioned was electric outlets, window or light switches. Do you happen to know, I don't recall from when I built my house, but what the current height is of an electric outlet? Is that a standard, 18 inches off the ground? And then what is universal design? Is that 24? Is that 30? So I guess I would be curious, I've seen pictures of some homes that were custom built for people that had disabilities, and it was very odd, the placement of a lot of the switches, but that could have also been very custom to that particular person. Is there a slight variance, or would somebody walk in and go, why is that electric outlet 4 feet off the ground?
There are certainly standards out there, obviously, for, conventional housing for the height of electrical sockets and light switches. And there's also studies out there that have standards, proven standards for universally designed placed light socket. It's usually, light switches are typically a little bit lower than they would be in a conventional house, and electrical sockets are typically a little bit higher. Usually the midsection of your body is where it's easiest for older adults or individuals with disabilities to reach out, so you're not having to reach higher up to turn a light on or lower down to plug a lamp in or something. But to answer your question, there are standards out there that have been proven to work.
Right, but we're talking it's a 12 to 18 inch maybe variance as opposed to like a 6 or 8 that'd be less noticeable. So it's harder to incorporate to kind of pre-proof the house. It's something that would be definitely substantially noticeable.
Correct.
Mr. Ullman.
Thank you, sir. Great presentation. I'm in favor of the pilot project. I think for the cost of permits at $7,500, it's certainly something that we should do and at least explore and see what kind of interest we have, what kind of information we get back. I think it's valuable from that standpoint, so very good. As my esteemed colleague mentioned before, I had done a little bit of research on this project on steroids, if you will, which is a completely computerized smart home with the theory being a user might be someone who is paralyzed from the waist down or a complete quadriplegic, especially returning war veterans. There's a lot of market for those individuals. The problem comes there in the cost, because now we're not talking about an $8,000 cost. We're talking homes that cost upwards of $500,000 or $600,000. But they are on the cutting edge of the market, and there is a strong demand among that particular group or demographic group of individuals who need that just to be able to get around their house. And in the case especially of returning war veterans, there are many organizations that will pay for those homes or assist in payment for those homes. We had a developer that had shown some early interest in maybe doing a project like that here. It didn't go through, but what a great reputation for our city if we could get someone to build something like that, even if there were just one. Would go right along with our theme of community for all ages and a community for people of all abilities.
Anyone else? Well, that kind of completes our formal presentation. As you know, this is our joint annual meeting, Planning and Zoning. And Mr. Faulkner, did you have anything you wanted to discuss with the group tonight? That
I don't in particular. We've gone through annual reviews of UDC, and I think we try to stay current. We'll have a case tomorrow that will be another hearing of sidewalk width, and so I think we continue to make improvements. Again, cost is a factor, marketability is a factor. I think, frankly, a lot of you, well, I'd say half of the council, have experience previously with Planning and Zoning Commission. I feel like we have a good relationship, since a lot of our cases are merely recommendations to City Council for final activity or final action. And I frankly am very happy with that relationship. I hope that Planning and Zoning Commission is providing you with what you need to help make good decisions, because we certainly try to take them apart and do due diligence. Other than that, it's good to see you all again. And I think we've got a pretty good representation this evening of Planning and Zoning Commission, including our newest member, Mr. Peterman. Welcome. Welcome aboard. And we will try to continue to provide that service from you. Mayor Turnbow does an excellent job of providing liaison between City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission, as does city staff. And there's probably not a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that goes by where I don't thank city staff. Without them, we could not do our job. And so we appreciate your support in helping staff support us as well. And in the end, it's all about Raymore. And I love your shirts.
There you go.
Thank
Yeah, I would agree, Mr. Faulkner. My 2.5 years I've been with the commission now have been, the interaction among the members of that group is wonderful. I mean, the ideas that come out of it, the questions that come out of it, it just make the final decision much more solid with respect to we know that that group is looking out for the best interests of the community, as is the council, and so it's very rewarding to see the start of that and then the finish over on the council side. So I do appreciate the work that you do too as our chair, and it is. I don't know. I think we'd be tough to beat in another city, to be honest with you, the synergy that we have between the two groups here. So, Mr. Holman.
I would completely concur, sir, and I would say that probably our strength of that foundation is the very intelligent and longstanding leadership of Mr. Faulkner and Mr. Carteret. There isn't anybody on the council that was on planning and zoning that wasn't taught by them, learned from them, including myself, as well as the current members as well. We are very fortunate to have both of them. And the city benefits from it every day going forward, because we have such strong leadership there and such a body of knowledge over time. And I, for one, greatly appreciate both of them very much.
I have to butt in and say thank you very much. I'm flattered, but it is, as you all remember, it is a team effort.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have anything? If not, that Mr. Fearborn, did you have anything you
just
wanted
one
to
last thing. Staff would seek consensus from the council to bring forward a resolution to formalize being able to waive permits on one home and in tandem approach the luxury apartment development group to see if they would be willing in tandem with that program to perhaps provide what Councilmember Kellogg outlined. We could outline all of that in a resolution. We would, as attachments to that, answer some more of the questions that we got tonight relative to resale value, cost versus resale value, put all that together. I would make sure that Mr. Carteret provide, even though it would be going to the council for approval, I would ask Mr. Carteret to share it with the Planning and Zoning Commission as a formal agenda item as well.
Excellent.
Thank you all very much.
Consensus there. Thank you all. And thank you all for being here tonight. We really do appreciate the work that you all do. Thank you.
Sarah and John.
Okay, well, I appreciate the council's indulgence as we transition over to and personnel as well at the table to go to our next item, which is the Oates bus. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. As the council knows, the fiscal year 2019 operating budget does include funding for a city-sponsored OATS bus. We have with us tonight Sarah Davis from the OATS program. Some of you maybe remember her from prior being here for a prior work session. And she has repeated that to me several times. If we can come to a conclusion on the contract for this fiscal year that we have just begun, it would be my intention to have the contract first reading in front of the council on November 26th, the second reading in front of the council on December 10th, with service then beginning based on some staff recommendations and acceptance by the city council tonight of those recommendations, service actually beginning in the month of December after that second read took place. Some of the questions, as you saw, that Sarah had posed that we need to be able to fill in on the contract are the hours of service, days of service, demand response or group transport, Belton and Raymore residents or just Raymore residents being served by it, general public or 60 plus and disabled, who qualifies as disabled if that is chosen, which would actually be more than likely be something that would be done at the staff level depending on which way the council decided that they were going to go. Who qualifies as a disabled person, again, administratively done, and locations for the bus to go, and some of that will be, Sarah and I spoke today, and I think I have a recommendation that we'd like to bounce past the council. And just to continue with this, I guess we would ask the council first, and Sarah, if you have any recommendations on this, by all means chime in. As far as ridership is concerned, would the council like to see in the contract Raymore residents only or Belton and Raymore residents? Raymore? And I think Sarah had kind of gone in that direction as well. So Raymore residents only. Sure, absolutely.
Sure. Turn your microphone on. Thank you.
Oh, I was on. The Belton contract that we have for the first Wednesday of every month allows the Raymore residents to go. I just want to clarify that so that you know that there are Belton and Raymore people on that, and their city council has approved for Belton and Raymore residents. So I think that's important.
Who's got one? Oh, Mrs. Delwood, go ahead.
I knew that, and that's my concern with limiting. I understand we're paying for Raymore residents, and I think that on one hand that makes sense. On the other hand, I'm afraid that by adding the Raymore bus, we would really be taking a bus away from our people, because if we are going to only pay for Raymore people, would Belton in turn do the same thing? I wonder, is there a way that we could say Belton and Raymore, but if we get to a situation where Belton people are riding and Raymore people aren't able to ride, we could give preference to Raymore citizens?
We can do that. I can, it would be up to you if how many people you want on the bus, if it's going to be group transportation, if it's going to be individual transportation, which is some of the questions I asked here. So, I mean, it really would be up to you guys.
Sarah, do you have any idea what the ridership is right now, what the breakdown is between Belton and Raymore?
About 50-50.
Okay.
Mr. Barber.
Well, I'm curious, because when I looked it up on the website, it says Belton first Wednesday, and then it says Mr. Adams is Raymore Belton. So, I mean, that led me to believe that the Belton on Wednesday was only Belton residents and that the Adams...
Sorry, it's Belton in town, meaning they stay in town, but it's Belton and Raymore residents. Mm-hmm.
Every bus provided now for the group shopping is both Belton and Raymore.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was on the website just now, and at one time I knew this, but what does OATS stand for again? I couldn't find it.
Doesn't stand for anything. It used to. Back in the 70s, it stood for Older Adults Transportation System. It no longer stands for anything.
Is it outside, does it exist outside of Missouri as well?
No, it does not. 87 counties in Missouri only.
Thank you.
Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a general question, and it may be specific to transit is why we're able to do it and why Belton's able to do it, but using city city funds for Belton residents to use, just kind of educate me on how we can. I'm just curious.
Might be a question for Mr. Zur.
You have any input on it? So technically, in order, when I originally went into it, my recommendation was for it simply be dedicated to Raymore as well. You are providing an opportunity for, and especially if you give a preference within the terms of the contract for Raymore, I don't think you're going to run afoul of any funding issues, especially if it's been opened on both ways and it's a mutual agreement. It may be worthy of the effort of at least contacting Belton and letting them know that it's a mutual two-way street for it.
Mr. Circo.
Well, then, I kind of have a question. If we end up with the OATS butts on a certain day for just Raymore, will Belton come back when they use theirs for Belton Raymore and then be maybe a little upset and say, you know what, we're going to use ours at Belton? I mean, will we get into a little fight with them about that? I don't know. Plus, I have an OATS bus that comes by every morning, and my neighbor picks him up. He's down syndrome, takes him to work, and brings him home. So I see that a lot too. But I don't want if we're going to get into a spat with Belton on what day they drive, and they'll cut off Raymore. If we're just doing Raymore on our day and no Belton, I don't know, what's going to happen with that.
Well, it certainly is something we could probably notify Belton of. I mean, we've not provided the service from the city before, but we do have it within the city as provided by other private contributors for Raymore. So it's, I mean, I see your point a little bit, Sonia, about denying service maybe on a particular day, but if we had, it's just a matter of rescheduling and people understanding. I mean, what would be Raymore's day and what would be Belton's day if you were to construct it as such?
Well, we're going to have recommendations on the day, sir, but the if you're saying like one of the 2 days a month would be just a Raymore day, and then one of the days of the month would be just a Belton day, I don't think staff would recommend that.
Not from Raymore. I'm just saying for a coordinating purpose that what they pay for is Belton residents, what we pay for is Raymore residents. That they may want to modify their
bus already runs the first Wednesday. Belton currently runs their bus the first Wednesday. We may as well jump into that. Belton runs their bus the first Wednesday. Mr. Adams' bus runs on the second and the fourth Wednesdays. Tuesday, yeah.
Second Wednesday and fourth Tuesday is sponsored by Jeff Adams.
So we would be recommending that third week on Wednesday for general shopping. We would be recommending, as was discussed by Councilmember Abdelgawad when this was proposed, the fifth, if there is a fifth Wednesday, that the bus be running on that one. But there are only 4 of those. So staff added up, and if each of the trips are 8-hour trips, 8-hour days, key on, key off, then for $240 more, which we could find, we could actually do every 5th Wednesday, if there was one. We could do the third Wednesday every single month, and we could add a kind of a unique feature or option that perhaps on the third Friday of the month, we have a run that is only for medical, because all these other runs are for shopping and lunch. And so we have a run that's medical under the guideline of it has to be within 20 miles of City Hall. And the reason we bring that 20 miles within City Hall, on the Missouri side up is because that would allow folks to be transported to Belton Research, Maine, Cass Regional Medical Center, St. Joseph, and St. Luke's East, which is a pretty good swath, and areas in between. The only thing that concerns me a little bit with using Friday is if they were going to those locations to visit a dentist, it seems like just about every dentist in the world now is closed on Friday. So we may want to have that be the Thursday of the third week instead.
I'm totally confused, but I'll let you better schedulers figure it out. Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jim. I appreciate your recommendations, and I think they're good ideas. Real quickly on the amount of, put my glasses on here, 5760. That contract amount, is that based on Belton and Raymore residents, or is it based on just Raymore residents riding the bus?
That amount is the $30 an hour, 8 hours a day, 2 days a month, 12 months of the year.
So that's the point I want to make. If we let people from Belton utilize our bus, it's not really a cost issue. It's just an issue of, are we possibly denying service to Raymore residents because we're letting Belton residents use it?
Point. No, that's a good point.
I would support trying it and seeing and maybe making changes later, but I mean, if the ridership's 50-50 right now, I also think that we should consider letting, in some fashion, letting the Belton residents ride the bus, whether it be in a limited capacity or just the way it is now with theirs.
If I may, sir.
Yeah.
If the council's ultimate goal was to try and get service to Raymore residents, whether in the limited capacity or in full capacity, every single week of the month in the middle of the week, then there is the possibility that if we went with Raymore residents only, Belton may respond to that saying, we're only going to go with Belton residents on that first Wednesday of the month, and so you would lose what you were hoping to gain in that regard.
Mr. Kellogg.
My question would be this, is how many residents, if any, are utilizing this, if we know that, and then how many have you had to turn away from Raymore based on unavailability or no space for them because the ridership is so great over in Belton?
We've never denied anyone for that bus. It has 12 seats on it, 2 wheelchairs. We've never denied anyone.
Okay, to follow that up, and I hear you. I'm sorry, but thank you. Is it a common practice, or do you have to do some creative scheduling for people that way they can get onto a bus and maybe not be on one but on another? I'm trying to get a feel of how full your vehicles are, because I can't see us creating a big swell of people that are going to suddenly need this service. But I see the value of having more service, more days of service. So that if you can answer that, that might help me a little bit more.
Okay, when we have a route like this, when you see the Belton or the Belton-Raymore days, we have one bus that picks all the people up. That's my question about whether this is going to be group transportation or whether it's going to be demand response. We have a contact who takes the list of names. Like I said, it's about 50-50. That bus picks everybody up. They all go to Target or over to the new shopping center or whatever, and they always go to a grocery store or Aldi or something like that. So it is group transportation. They're all going to the same place. The bus runs an average of about 10 people per trip, which when you have 10 people buying groceries for a month, that's a lot of stuff on the back of our bus. I would encourage, and I'm not sure if anybody in here has ever gone and met with that bus. I know Jeff Adams does it all the time when the day that he sponsors is riding, to see the people and see what their needs are. I don't know if that's even been done. See what they're wanting.
Did you have something?
And just to add, I speak fairly regularly, almost once a month, to one of the bus riders. And she shares that because the bus is so full with 10-ish people, their bags are limited. They have days, depending on how many people are on the bus, that they can only have 2 shopping bags full of things from their shopping trip, because if someone is riding the bus that has a mobile cart or a wheelchair, it reduces the amount of room on the bus for their shopping bags. Additionally, the more people on the bus, of course, the longer it takes to go pick them up, the less shopping time they have. So the bus provides curb-to-curb, door-to-door service. So the bus driver is carrying their bags to their doors for them. So again, the more people on the bus, the less room there is for bags and the less shopping time they have. And I mean, I think we want the buses full. We want to provide this service to as many people as we can. She's mentioned that just as she meets people in the community, or as she learned of a new service that Oates provides and has shared that with people, and Oates doesn't do much advertising. There's not a lot of word out in the community about this shopping trip service or other services they provide. So I'm hopeful that with the city taking on these 2 buses and providing more advertisement about it, we'll actually be able to reach out to more people in our community who need this kind of service than those who are utilizing it now, which was part of why I thought, if we have room on the buses, why not fill them up with people from whichever city they live in? However, if we begin communicating to people in Raymore, we're providing this service, the service is out here, then maybe we'll need to say, our buses, Raymore people get top priority. We also, hopefully, in my rose-colored glasses world, we'll find people who this meets a need that they have that we can provide, and maybe get to the point where we have to kind of say, well, you can ride the bus 2 weeks a month, but maybe not every week, because we don't want necessarily those same 10 people on the bus all 5 weeks if we're having to turn people away. So I hope we can get to a point where we have to tell people, we're glad you're using this service, we're glad we're able to provide this service, but we have all these people, because I think there are people out there who need more help than what is easy to access in our community.
Mr. Barber?
Well, I just, I brought this forward, and one of the things, I knew we weren't going to have all the answers in the beginning, but I thought that we needed to start somewhere, and I think this is a good beginning. It sounds like your folks are pretty flexible, so I think what we need to is kind of make a decision, get this where we can manage it, let's get started, and then initially, I really thought this would just be for Raymore residents. I would like it to turn into that for Raymore residents. I don't like to be dependent on another community for our own residents. Mr. Holman, you mentioned that about street safety one time to me, so that's important. But I think with this, I think we need to get started. So let's kind of get this kind of nailed down to how we want to do it and how we want to manage it. I think all the ideas are good, but let's get started. So, thanks.
Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Barber. And Sonia, thank you for your comments. I remember us talking about this several years ago, and many of these questions were asked then, but there's a lot more definitive answers tonight. I'm in agreement with this, and I'm the same way, Kevin, is that, when we were asked tonight if this can be just Raymore or Belton Raymore, and, I sat here and I'm the same way, I said Raymore. But Sonia has a very good point, and that's why I asked the questions I did tonight. I see this, I can see this, Mr. Mayor, as one of those things that us and our neighbors, Belton, would benefit greatly both together with cooperation and open dialogue. You know, no matter if we choose whatever route we do tonight, you know, this is kind of a, if this does happen, this is us opening the door. But I would like to see staff and encourage staff to work with Belton to see where we can have maybe kind of like our construction bids. We do construction bids co-op, so it benefits both communities. We negotiated 2 contracts with the trash company, you know, and we did good for both communities during that. Staff's done wonderful things with Belton. This is one of those things that I would encourage them to discuss that and see how we can work together for the betterment of both.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things I don't want to do here is put together the functions of the Oates bus paid for with private funds as opposed to the Oates bus that's running on municipal funds out of tax dollars. And from my point of view, as a person that looks at a lot of data, looks at a lot of charts and graphs and things as a science person, I want this to be efficient for the riders as well as the gas mileage. And if we double the geographic location that this would serve, we're going to spend a lot of money on driving a bus that's partially empty to get people that are waiting to do shopping if we're going both sides, both communities. Right now we're adding something that we are not paying for with our municipal funds. I think it should go to the people that pay those municipal funds.
You want to
Understood. Just one point of clarification. It's actually, the payment is actually by the hour, not by gas mileage.
In the contract where it talks about sliding scales and, and payment per hour.
That's if gas price goes up or down. It doesn't have anything to do with the mileage itself, though, sir. Just a point of clarification.
I just think that time on task would be better served at getting a group of people that live in a closer geographic location and then delivering them at their destination that they intend to go to, and then being able to maybe get them to a second location in that day, if it permits, but not necessarily spending the duration of the day just transporting until the bus is full and then getting to a location. Maybe I don't understand how it actually works, but I do feel that the time should be used to most efficiently.
Can I comment?
jump in, or you want to jump in? He was going to offer a compromise here.
Perhaps because I am hearing a number of different proposals from the council. Jonathan had early on quietly proposed the idea, perhaps for this first year, so we get the makeup and we get this thing started. As Councilmember Barber said, and Councilmember Kellogg said, the compromise position could be Belton Raymore residents, but Raymore preference. If there are Raymore seats taken first, Raymore goes first, then Belton comes on it only if there are vacant seats, and we could write that into the contract. One last thing. Sure. And as far as time on task is concerned, it will be up to the council to also decide on shopping in Raymore only, shopping in Belton only, or shopping in Belton and Raymore, which would help to reduce time on task if it's Belton and Raymore both.
Thank you, sir. I would, that's about what I was going to say, with one little caveat at the end. A lot of questions about what will be the use of this. Will it stay consistent with what it does? Exactly what Mr. Fearborn said with, can we get a quarterly report on this on ridership and where those people are from? And then if we need to make changes going forward, we can do that as we go.
Good point.
Absolutely, and the contract is tailored to simply 1 year.
I have an amazing scheduling system that can give you any report you need and how many people are writing and all of that. What I would like to address is I think what you guys need to decide is what's your goal here. And I don't know if you've gone and talked to like anybody from Grain Valley. We just signed a contract with Grain Valley in June, and they provide transportation for their residents only, but they're allowing them to go into Blue Springs because Grain Valley doesn't have a lot of shopping or doctors or anything. I also have contract with the city of Blue Springs that it's just for Blue Springs residents, and they have them stay within Blue Springs. With that said, it's demand response transportation. It is not group transportation, which means the people call my office, they say, I want to go to Walmart, and I would like to go at 9 o'clock, and we take them to Walmart. What we have going right now with the Jeff Adams contract and the Belton contract is it's group transportation. We have a contact that takes these names. If they don't have more than 5 people, she's on the phone calling the people saying, do you want to go? If we don't have enough to fill the bus, we're not going to get to go. That's another thing you have to decide. If you do group transportation, if I've only got 4 people, do you want us to still take them? So it kind of depends. Are you trying to get people shopping, or do you want them to be able to call in and schedule an appointment to go anywhere within Raymore? So I think those are the things that have to be decided. And with a contract like that, then I would say that it needs to be Raymore residents staying in Raymore. But I mean, that's just, it depends how you design it.
I think Mr. Pureborn has a recommendation on that.
My recommendation to the council is, because it is a municipal service that is offered, that whether there's 1 or whether there's 12, you run the service. It would be a nightmare for Mr. Icky as far as keeping faith with the voters and keeping faith with the people who you made the promise to. Staff would also recommend group transportation, because that's what folks down here are used to. Staff would recommend Belton and Raymore for the aforementioned thoughts that I had. Staff would recommend Belton Raymore for the shopping area. In the contract, staff would recommend Raymore preference as far as the seats were concerned. Just to kind of black and white it.
Yeah, but in addition to that, Jonathan?
Simply by the basis of the Friday, I think the Friday would be identified as one of the demand response ones, because that's going to be where they call up specifically for medical, isn't that right?
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. I just want to get through the shopping days. And then we'll have another recommendation for the city council on the medical day.
All right, Mr. Circo.
Well, what I've heard here, what I see is probably going to come down to very simple. Belton's doing a Belton Raymore, and we go to a group, Raymore Belton. Obviously, once that Raymore people know we have a bus on a certain day, you probably might see a shift of the Raymore for the Belton bus. Will start wanting to ride the Raymore bus because they're in Raymore and they can shop both places. Then you'll see your numbers change on the Belton bus, and then we'll see our numbers change on our Raymore bus. And then we can keep an accurate, a number of Raymore people on the bus. I'm assuming that will happen. It makes sense that what happened once we actually establish a Raymore bus. They'll just shift their bus and their days shopping because it's a Raymore bus. And then it'll help us get a better decision on what we do, but I think we should do both cities right now like they are, and then let the shoppers, the residents, make up their mind on the bus, and I think they, again, will probably vary the change of their days to the bus of their community.
Yes,
I was going to say, that's a fine recommendation, Mr. Fairmore, and I like that. And when you ask, make a decision down the road, I think having, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of you, but having the group and then having the, doing the response, I think, and then in a year, take a look at it and say, do we need to add another day? Do we need to have the demand, single demand is not really used that much. We take that away and add another day, something like that, so.
Mr. Kellogg.
I think Mr. Barber just said part of what I wanted to say there. I know you did. The point that I want to make is that we're going to be paying $30 an hour for this, regardless if that bus stays in Raymore, or if that bus goes over to Belton, or if that bus goes over to Lake Winnebago. We're going to be paying $30 an hour. It's not going to be based on anywhere else. So if we have one rider, we pay $30 an hour for that whole time. That whole time. So if we have 12 riders, we're still only paying $30 an hour. It doesn't matter. You know, it does matter, but it's, if we can do a good deed for a neighbor with what we're already paying out, I don't see a problem with it. I don't see a problem with it. You know, it's what do we do? You know, I mean, we have a soup kitchen, and
we do.
Well, if we did, I'm giving an example. If we had a soup kitchen and we had 50 pounds of meat to serve and only 5 people wanted to eat 3 pounds of it, we'd be throwing the rest of it away. You know, there's still hunger across the bridge. You know, that's an example. That's a metaphor or a simile, whatever we want to call it. But $30 an hour, $30 an hour. You know, it just, I don't know. That's what I got.
Mr. Holman.
I think we have consensus on staff's recommendation. I think we're doubling the hill here.
Do you have any follow-up?
Talking about the medical day, Sarah and I were speaking on it today. It's going to take some craftiness on both of our parts to get it. What I am currently thinking and recommending to the council is that it be not a group, not an on-demand. I guess it would be more of an on-demand, but we would be running a loop between those, and it would take a little bit of homework on our part to determine when we drop somebody off at St. Joe, we're going to be going to this hospital after that, and we're just running a loop throughout the day, and we're telling those people, we're not going to be back until here, but go ahead and schedule. And we see if people want to take advantage of that. If they don't, then we'll be coming back to you all with a fifth, probably recommending that we simply shift that other day to being a shopping day. But it feels like it's a demand. It was a demand for my parents, and they would have been willing, I know, before they passed away, to have the Oates bus take them over to St. Joseph Hospital, even if it meant that they had to have lunch there before the bus came back through.
I just have one question. I agree with staff's recommendations as far as both the group shopping trip and the medical transportation services. One question I didn't hear you mention the answer to was the 60 plus and disabled or general public. Are we thinking 60 plus and disabled?
Is the Belton bus 60 plus and disabled?
Yes, it is. And I noticed that the community for all ages, though, is 65 and over. So I don't know if that's where you want to go with that, or if you want to do the 60 plus.
Probably 60 plus, and we could have some preschoolers on the bus with the 65 pluses.
I'll do 55 and then I can ride.
60? We're going to keep it at 60.
60 plus. Very good. And disabled.
Yeah.
For sure.
And who's going to qualify the disabled? I would be happy to do that, but I want that put in the contract.
Sure.
That when they call in, we get their information, because they're having to give us their information anyway. I have a medical form that I can send them, or if it's just or they tell me they're disabled, that's up to you. You make that call.
Very good.
But I have a form we can send to them to fill out from their doctor. So
you and I can work through that one. That concludes staff reports, sir.
Okay, great. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next item. Item C is the municipal judge.
Thank you. I guess this one starts with a very simple question of the council. Would you want to retain the services of Judge Nigro for the next 2-year period? And if you do, I will follow the schedule as I outlined on the administration sheet. 2 weeks from now, he would appear before you for the same sort of interaction that we had 2 years ago, with the judge, just to kind of hear back and forth the challenges and what's going good, what's going in a direction that maybe he would have some concerns on it. And following that, we would then bring, under the same schedule as the Oats bus, first reading, then the last meeting of November, second reading, first meeting of December, and he would be ready to assume his duties on January 1. But I welcome input from the council on.
You want Mr. Holman?
Yes.
Mr. Townsend?
I'm a yes, but I have a question with regard to, are there, how often, what's the term? The term is 2 years, but is there a term limit? How do we request a new or do?
The term is 2 years. There is no term limit.
How long was before Judge Negro, how long was the previous judge?
Well, we keep losing them to the county. I think one of the reasons Judge Nigro seemed attractive to the council is because he promised he wouldn't leave us. But it's been varying. Some of them have been here a little bit longer, but for the most part, I don't think anybody went over a decade before they left and went to the county.
Other than Judge Olson.
Yeah, Judge Olson
was here quite a while.
Yeah, he was the first of the defectors, if you will.
Anyone else?
Very good. Judge Nigro will be in front of you in 2 weeks for discussions accordingly.
Moving right along, we've got one last formal item on the agenda, and that's a quarterly communications report.
I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Icky, who's approaching the table as I speak.
Thank you, sir. Get myself organized. So for our communications report this quarter, we kind of included several reports within the report. If you had already kind of leafed through everything, you'll notice that one of the first reports you see in there is our Granicus benchmarking report. This is the one that I'm going to talk about mostly tonight. But what I wanted to talk about, or at least make you aware of, is at the very back of the communications report is the first summary from the KU Public Management Center from the October 1st community conversation. Wanted to give you a chance because we also wanted to make this public as soon as we had it in our hands so that members of the public as well as those that attended would have a chance to read through that report, allow council to read through that report and really digest it. And on November 19th, we'll have members of the KU Public Management Center will be here at the work session to do a formal presentation and also answer questions from the council about the report and some of their findings that will help staff as we start to go back into the strategic planning process. So for that one, I'll leave that report for you to digest. As for highlights this quarter in the communications department, we had another really successful quarter. 44 media hits in our traditional media tracking. Also saw an increase in the number of regional media hits through television as well as regional media. And if you got a chance, there was one line in there from the APWA Reporter magazine. That is a national magazine. It's the American Public Works Association's trade publication. We had a 2-page spread written by Melissa McGee that went in talking about the accomplishments and the highlights of our own Public Works Department. Sometimes it's really nice because my job is incredibly easy when we have people doing incredibly good work. So it's easy to talk about them and highlight them and the good things that they're doing. What I wanted to spend tonight and the bulk of tonight talking about really focuses a lot on the electronic media, our email marketing program, our website, as well as some of our social media. Back in the first part of the year, right at the beginning in January, February, the company Vision, which operates and developed our website, Vision was bought out by another company called Granicus. Now, Vision was a smaller company based on the West Coast. Granicus is an international company that has a lot of digital assets that they support for cities across the country, Canada, and in the UK. While this was a benefit to the number of resources that we now have at the city without any increase in cost, it also allowed us to really utilize a lot of the data and the metrics and benchmarking that they have on their end. They specialize and they are experts in local government, state government, websites, and web products. And so for us to be able to have this resource, such as the benchmarking report, is really fantastic because unlike a private business, since we're not necessarily selling widgets, we can't measure how successful our communications and our marketing is based on the sale of something. A lot of times city governments, our size or larger, we get caught in this trap of, well, how are we measuring how successful our communications efforts are? And we tend to fall into this, well, how aware are people of the things we have going on? We can definitely track how often people sign up for programs, how many people attend events, but at the end of the day, how do we know that people know what's going on in the city? That's a really difficult metric to track, which is why we come back to this benchmark report. It's very easy for me to say these are the benchmarks I want to set because these are the things that I feel like make us successful, but to be able to truly compare ourselves to other cities, to compare ourselves to other government entities and say this is how successful our program is going is nice to have in our back pocket and something that I really want to be able to share with you all today. So Granicus actually is the one that put this report together. They were able to survey about 1,000 different local government, state government departments here in the US, Canada, and the UK, and were able to really pull together a nice benchmarking report. So what I'm going to be referring to is these are the statistics from the report itself, but for the most part, I'm going to be looking at our own digital media tracking. And that's something that we pull the data from ourselves and that we end up kind of analyzing and putting together through that spreadsheet, kind of the multicolor spreadsheet that you have in your report. So this first metric, or this benchmarking that we're going to be looking at, these are the number of email opens that we receive through the email program. Now, through this quarter, we ended up sending roughly, I want to make sure I get this correct, roughly 23,000 emails throughout the 3 months in this quarter. And that includes the weekly report, the police blotter every week when we send bids out, as well as the monthly Parks and Recreation report. Of those emails that we send out, about 45% or 45.12% are opened. And of those emails that are opened, 50% of them have someone engage with them. So someone clicks it, someone forwards it, someone actually reads the content and engages with it. And what's pretty amazing here is in the metrics provided by Granicus, we can see that over the last 3 years, on average of governments our size, an open rate for an email sat at around 21%. And so the fact that we're continuing to see 45% on ours is pretty incredible. Also, what I wanted to highlight is at the top, you'll see the overall, the federal, state, and local, and my focus is going to stay on that state and local, while 22% is roughly the median for programs that are achieving in the top 20% or that have, the top 20% of opens and are really in the kind of the cream of the crop, they're seeing only a 31% open. And again, we're still well above at 45%. Again, you're probably wondering, like, what do a lot of these numbers truly mean for us at the city? For me as a communications director, this means that we are still seeing a high level of engagement with our emails and that they're incredibly successful in informing our residents about the programs that we have going on. That right there is my bright line to show that we are hitting that awareness mark. So the next one here talks about links or clicked links in those emails. As I stated a little earlier, we have a 45% open rate, but we have a 50% click rate. So of every email that goes out and gets opened, 50% of those emails are getting clicked. On average, according to the Granicus data, only about 5% of those emails that go out in the top 20% of programs are getting clicked. So we're able to compare ourselves to essentially single-digit high achievers to where we're able to achieve a 50% click rate through our email program. Again, another great example of how engaged our residents are with the digital products we put out. This is another interesting metric that we're going to start tracking a lot more closely in coming reports. This metric shows, of the people who are signed up for our email program, how many of them have more than one subscription. So you don't just subscribe to only the weekly report, but you also subscribe to the police blotter. You also subscribe to our RFP listing, or the different programs within the Parks Department. On average, among peer organizations, most people who sign up for an email newsletter only sign up for 2 different subscriptions. With the city of Raymore, we exceed that up to about 6 subscriptions per subscriber. And we currently have about 3,000 subscribers to our email program right now. And so you have to imagine, of those 3,000, they're subscribed to 6 different lists. We continue to compound exponentially the amount of engagement that we have in the program. This metric through the program really focuses more on how people are engaging with our website. This is going to be an area that we're going to want to really focus on in the future as to how people are engaging the website, either through a desktop program or through their cell phone or iPad. This is one of those areas we're really in line with. We see about a 50-50 split of people who either are using a mobile device versus a desktop device. It really informs how we need to be writing information on the website, how we need to be designing pages on the website. But it's the next slide that's really important, because while we see this 50-50 split and we're really in line with this according to kind of the national standards, this is one that it kind of took me by surprise. For the most part on our website, probably about 60 to 70% of the visitors that come to our website, they start on the homepage. And we've designed our homepage in such a way that we know the top items people are looking for are how to pay a bill, how to engage with Parks and Rec, how to find a job, and then how to find out more information about their utility services. If you go to our website on the homepage, you'll notice those are the 4 main circles right in the middle of the site. But at the top of the site, we have that search bar because we want to encourage people to search for items. As large as our website is, we want them to search and find the items on their first try on the website. What Granicus is telling us, though, is over time and over the last 3 years, people are no longer using the home page as the portal into the website. Among other peer cities and governments, they're finding people are jumping directly to those interior pages, which means, and this is one of those areas, as much as I like to talk about how great things are going for our communications efforts, this is one area where I see we can achieve a lot of improvement. We really need to start focusing on our interior pages, so the pages such as the police department's landing page or Parks and Recreation's landing page, Public Works' landing page. When we encourage people to engage with specific departments, we want to ensure that they are receiving the same kind of well-designed experience that we focus so heavily on the homepage. So if you go to the Parks and Recreation page, you're going to know and you're going to feel like you're on an interior page and not on that full homepage experience. So the next few items here, and I won't get into the data as much as I like to geek out on some of the communications data, but the report itself is really helpful in diving even further into kind of the specific categories of economic development. And one of the things Mr. Tapp and I have talked about is developing an email program specifically for economic development. And really these are the successful benchmarks that we're going to be looking at as we develop that. Same with arts and culture. The Arts Commission has its own Facebook page and email program. Elected officials themselves, if they have email programs or Facebook pages, it gives some great data as to what will help you follow and guide. As well as public safety, we have the Facebook page and email program for the police department, as well as Public Works and utilities. All high engagement areas for the communications department and areas that we stay pretty focused on and on top of throughout the quarter. That really concludes my side of the presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question may be directed at Mr. Fairborn. It might be directed at Mr. Sir. Might be directed at you. This is slightly to the side, tangential. The newspaper of record that we contract, is that only for the parts that are legal notices? Is that the part that we have control over? Just a question.
This may have been a topic for other that I was going to be bringing up to the council in just a little bit. They are the newspaper of record only for legal notices that have to go out. And at the end of this presentation, I was going to ask Mr. Icky to update you all on what I'm sure you all noticed in a recent episode of SAME.
Thank you.
Mr. Holman.
Something, I went through this, the extemporaneous material provided for the briefing tonight with great enthusiasm. Having been on the council and on a board for quite a while and seeing the truly leaps and bounds the communications department has taken since you've come on, that is a great source of personal pride. I felt like we had really advanced our cause among our citizens. And I realize it's a small sample group, but I was a little bit disappointed when I saw some of the preliminary reports coming out of the community conversations. One of the biggest things on there was we want an increase in communications, Facebook, and I'm like, we're doing all that stuff. But I took a seat back and said, perception is reality. If they feel they're not getting it, I mean, we do provide it there. Obviously, it's not clicking with them. And one of the, I think, kind of bullet points that the key public management system touched on, it kind of hit a nerve with me that might fix some of those problems. And it's really more food for thought, but I would be interested, if not tonight, in the future, for you to chew on this and the council to consider it, would be maybe at some point, a year or two from now, investing in some electronic billboards around town, programmable electronic billboards that you could control. We could control here from City Hall in visible places along our city, and then those would serve just like a standard paper billboard does now. That's going to direct you to something else. It's going to give you a list of information. It'll tell you when the mayor's Christmas tree lighting is, where it's at, and what time. And if you want more information, you go to www.raymore. So I think that may have some value for us to consider in the future, as we go forward. So really struck me.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Icky. Good report. I think I remember the last report you did. It looks like our numbers are trending better. Is that correct? I think they're going up. Yeah. One of those reasons, I'm a little paranoid. I open up everything you send me because I know you're watching me. But and I think it kind of goes when you see. The numbers like they are, it tells me a couple of things. The information you're providing is valuable. People see that there's value in it, and that's why they continue to use it and open it. And I think, too, kind of goes against Mr. Holman there, but I think sometimes we get too much. I know I have some entities that seem like they send me 3 emails a day, and that's just too much information at times. I think what we get from you is timely, and it's accurate, obviously, and it's not too much. So I don't really have any criticisms on that. And I like I said, it's nice that you got a matrix you can look at and see it trending up. You know, the old saying in advertising was every dollar you spent in advertising, only 50 cents of that worked. The problem was which 50 cents. So this is nice. You can really kind of glean out, what's working and not working. Good job. Thanks.
Mr. Fearborn.
I think to Councilmember Holman's statement, one of the things that, in a more general sense, and that would certainly be one of the items on the laundry list, we have to figure out how to tell them that we're telling them.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. Very much so.
Anyone else? Ms. Burke.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we do that's well done is having multiple subscription availabilities. People are able to direct certain things to themselves, and they don't maybe necessarily want these other things. And there's definitely some other taxing entities that'll send emails with 40, or I actually counted 40 different items on an email I got the other day, and I said, well, no wonder no one goes past the first 3 or 4. So less is more, and sometimes the more is nothing.
Dolman. Yeah.
Something that we might want to try, it shocked me the other day when I took my oldest son, who's 18, to get his driver's license renewed. We could do something similar here with water bill. When people come in to pay their water bill, you now, when an 18-year-old goes and gets his or her driver's license renewed, they offer you the option, have you registered for selective service? If you have not, which my son already had, they will click a box and it will do it for you. So we could say, are you signed up for the weather alerts? We can do that right here. I can do it with that. All you have to do is give me a verbal yes. They can also register you to vote. My 18-year-old got registered to vote when he renewed his driver's license. That would not be hard to set up at all, and it certainly is ease of convenience for those people who still make a physical presence to pay their bill. So it might be worth, I was amazed that you could do all that in one visit just to get your driver's license renewed. Might be something worth looking into.
Anyone else? Mr. Circo.
Oh, to touch on what Mr. Holman said, I've noticed that for years. You see the bank down here, Country Club and Community Bank of Raymore, a number of entities, they do have those signs out, and they are remind you of certain entities, different times. And it really, I remind myself when I'm driving, oh yeah, almost forgot about that. So I understand where Mr. Holman's coming from. It would be nice down on the road if we had something that we can control to kind of remind people when things come up, the Christmas tree lighting or the veterans coming up, to let people see it all the time when they're driving and they get in their mind and they won't forget it because it's always there.
Mr. Kellogg.
Food for thought. It's been 10 years since Councilman Stevens and I refurbished the Fox Haven signs there. That'd be a good place for an electronic billboard. Hint, hint.
Nothing else. You want to go ahead and move, as a segue, you want to move into the follow-on to that?
Certainly, sir, and we'll take into account all of those items for maybe even as early as the 2109 budget.
2109.
And with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Icky to address how we addressed that particular issue, which we had staff members who couldn't even finish the article because they didn't recognize any of the names in it. So here he goes.
We immediately recognized the issues in the article. We have reached out to both the author, the reporter, as well as staff at the company that owns the newspaper. We are not necessarily expecting a major correction or retraction, but we have offered all of the support that we can from the communications department to assist in any way possible to ensure that news is being delivered in a timely and accurate fashion through the Raymore Journal. It is important to us that that information, especially coming from city council meetings, is correct, especially when, in some cases, there really is only one article from a city council meeting about the actions being taken. And so it's something that we've taken very seriously and hope to work with them on in the future.
Our local reporter now is in Abilene, so there will be no reporter presence from that particular publication at your council meetings. I believe the intention is to watch the council meetings on YouTube and report from there, thus the misspellings, thus the statesmanlike way in which Mr. Icky reached out to them to suggest that maybe we have a greater role in helping them be accurate. And we will proceed with all aggression in doing so.
Yeah, so we have no local contact now. I received a call from the previous reporter that did come to our meetings, and she said that she and the other individual are no longer with the paper, so we're kind of stuck with Abilene on this thing. So it may be a challenge for them to really get a feel for our community that far away. Kind of is what it is. Mr. Barber.
Well,
I guess, my understanding, are you talking about maybe like doing a press release after each council meeting? Is that kind of what, okay.
One of the things that we will offer, and there are a number of ideas that myself and Ms. McGee are coming up with, but one of the things we have talked about is a wrap-up after council meetings of essentially an action debrief that we could share with all local media that would accurately represent what happened at a council meeting in a given night.
Like Mr. Holman does.
We'll just make a recording and pass that along.
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Mr. Fearborn.
That concludes staff reports this evening, sir.
Thank you. It is now 20 minutes till 9. If there's nothing else, anyone? We're adjourned.